They weren't banned for pollution. They were banned because they were dangerous. Engines that caught fire, exploded, or took control of the boat themselves. These are 12 outlawed outboards that manufacturers would rather you forget, the ones that made the water truly terrifying. This is the engine that went from revolutionary to recall faster than you can say Mayday. The Evinrude FICHT was supposed to be the future, fuel-injected, clean-burning, and powerful enough to drag OMC back into glory. Instead, it dragged the whole company underwater. The 200 and 225 models were ticking time bombs. Faulty injectors and poor combustion mapping meant unburned fuel could pool in the engine housing, turning it into a pressure cooker. Some owners reported engines bursting into flames. Others said pistons shot through the cowling like shrapnel. It got so bad the U.S. Coast Guard issued an advisory telling owners to stop using certain serial numbers until repairs were done. Dealers scrambled to fix them, but the lawsuits piled up faster than warranty claims. OMC filed for bankruptcy soon after, and the FICHT became legend, the outboard that ended an empire. Even today, mechanics say if you see FICHT on a cowling, you should turn and run. Because when that motor coughed, it didn't clear its throat, it cleared the whole boat. If you think that was bad, the next one's even hotter. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Right when Evinrude's FICHTs were catching fire, Mercury decided to join the barbecue. Their 225 and OptiMax 200/225 outboards looked unstoppable on paper, fuel-injected, smooth, and built for speed. But under the cowl, a tiny component turned them into potential flamethrowers, the fuel rail outlet plug. That little plug had one job: keep the gas where it belongs. When it failed, it sprayed fuel directly onto a hot engine block. Thousands of boaters suddenly discovered that OptiMax sounded suspiciously like OptiBurn. The U.S. Coast Guard didn't find it funny either. They issued a major recall covering over 14,000 engines, warning owners to stop using them until the fix was complete. Mercury dealers replaced the entire fuel rail system, but the damage to the brand was real. Word spread fast across marinas. Check your fuel line before you check your tackle. Even today, older OptiMax models carry a faint stigma from this fiery chapter. The irony? Mercury's motto was, "Go boldly." And these engines did boldly straight into Coast Guard paperwork. When Yamaha rolled out its HPDI line, high-pressure direct injection, it promised cutting-edge tech and unmatched power. What boaters got instead was a masterclass in how to seize an engine in the middle of nowhere. The 250 and 300 models were strong on paper, but their oil delivery system had a nasty habit of starving the cylinders just when you needed it most. Owners reported sudden power loss, smoke, or full-blown engine seizure at cruising speed. Imagine running 40 miles offshore and your $20,000 motor decides it's time for a nap. Mechanics found injectors clogging, pumps overheating, and power heads that looked like they'd survived a grenade test. Yamaha issued service bulletins and extended warranties, but many fleets, including rescue and patrol boats, quietly banned HPDI units from active use due to reliability concerns. Yamaha eventually retired the HPDI name, pretending it never existed, while mechanics still joke that HPDI stood for high-priced dead investment. The technology was bold, the power impressive, but it earned its place on this list the hard way, by leaving too many boaters stranded with smoking wallets. Suzuki's DF300A was meant to be the brand's crown jewel, a 300-horsepower four-stroke that could outlast anything on the water. And to be fair, when it ran, it was a beast. But then came a recall that turned every boater's right hand into a potential liability. The problem? A faulty throttle actuator that could either stick wide open or refuse to respond at all. That's right. 1 second you're idling into the dock, the next your boat's lunging forward like it's possessed. Reports came in from both the US and Australia of engines refusing to slow down, jumping RPMs, or cutting out mid-run. Suzuki eventually admitted the actuator motor could seize internally and issued a global recall to replace affected units. Dealers rushed to calm angry owners who joked that the DF stood for "Don't Flinch." For a company known for bulletproof reliability, it was a rare stumble. Suzuki fixed the issue quickly, but the scare was unforgettable, because nothing ruins a fishing trip faster than your motor deciding it's had enough of idle speed. Honda's BF-135 and BF-150 were supposed to be the quiet achievers of the outboard world, smooth, fuel-efficient, and famously dependable. Then came 2011, when Honda got a wake-up call from the US Coast Guard. The reason? A tiny shift arm buried deep in the midsection had a bad habit of fracturing under load. That might sound minor until you realize that when it broke, the engine lost all ability to shift. Forward, neutral, reverse, gone. Imagine trying to dock in a crosswind with a 150 horsepower motor stuck in gear. Some owners learned the hard way, ending up sideways, scraping hulls, or worse. Honda's engineers quickly traced the fault to a batch of weak castings, and the company issued an official safety recall to replace the defective parts. Dealers handled it quietly, but word spread through marinas faster than a propeller in neutral. It wasn't Honda's proudest moment, but to their credit, they faced it head-on. Still, it's proof that even the most reliable names can slip, and when they do, it's usually right when you're trying to look like a pro at the dock. The E-Tech G2 was meant to be Evinrude's redemption arc, a sleek, futuristic outboard packed with torque and tech. It looked like something Darth Vader would hang off the back of his base boat, but beneath that space-age cowling lurked a problem so serious that BRP had to issue multiple safety recalls, steering nut and gear case failures that could cause total loss of control. Owners began reporting a terrifying sensation mid-turn. The steering wheel suddenly went loose, followed by the lower unit shifting on its own. In rough seas, that's a heart-stopping moment. BRP's internal tests confirmed the mounting nuts and housing threads could loosen under load, and if they failed, the gear case could detach entirely. The company acted fast, replacing the defective components and warning dealers to ground affected engines, but the headlines stuck harder than epoxy. E-Tech G2 recall for steering failure. It was supposed to be the dawn of a new era for Evinrude, cleaner, smarter, cooler. Instead, it became another cautionary tale that even cutting-edge engineering can't outrun bad bolts. Yamaha's VF225 SHO was the kind of motor that made bass anglers grin like kids at Christmas, sleek, fast, and whisper quiet. But in 2022, that smile turned to panic when Yamaha dropped an urgent safety recall bulletin. The reason? A faulty ECU engine control unit that could do something truly terrifying. Ignite unburned fuel in the intake manifold. In plain English, that meant your outboard could suddenly catch fire. Not metaphorically, literally. Owners started reporting strange popping sounds, rough idling, and the occasional puff of smoke where smoke should definitely not be. Yamaha's engineers traced the issue to an ECU software fault that could energize the ignition coils at the wrong time, turning a smooth startup into a fire hazard. The recall spanned multiple countries, and dealers worked overtime updating firmware and swapping ECUs. Yamaha handled it quickly and professionally, but the internet never forgets. For a company famous for reliability, fire risk wasn't exactly on brand. The SHO was still a great motor after the fix, but for a while it was less super high output and more super hot outboard. If there was ever an outboard that defined the phrase, "too much of a good thing," it was the Johnson GT 300 V8. This beast looked like something that belonged on a rocket sled, not the back of a fishing boat. With 300 horsepower of pure two-stroke fury, it was OMC's attempt to prove that bigger really was better. Spoiler, it wasn't. The GT 300's torque was so brutal, it could rip steering mounts apart and twist transoms into splinters. On smaller hulls, the engine would literally overpower the boat, sending drivers scrambling to stay in control. More than a few unlucky owners found themselves facing backward mid-run, wondering where their boat went. Mechanics called it the Widowmaker, and OMC quietly pulled the plug after just 3 years. It wasn't a recall, it was an act of mercy. The GT 300 was the Wild West of horsepower, built before hulls or safety systems were ready for that kind of thrust. Today, it's a collector's curiosity, part legend, part warning label. Because sometimes, just because you can bolt a V8 to a transom doesn't mean you should. The Force Outboards were supposed to make boating affordable again. Built under Chrysler's watch, they promised simple mechanics, low prices, and easy maintenance. But what buyers actually got was a masterclass in corner cutting. The Force 125 and 150 models in particular became infamous for something you never want to hear about an engine, lower unit blowouts. The problem came down to cheap castings and thin gears that simply couldn't handle sustained RPM. Push it too hard and the gears could strip or the case could literally crack, sending the propeller spinning off like a frisbee. A few marina fleets even banned Force Outboards after several units failed mid-charter, leaving renters drifting while pieces of their engines sank behind them. Mercury eventually bought the brand and tried to polish the name, but the damage was irreversible. By the late 90s, Force had become a running joke, the only outboard that might actually fall off before it ran out of fuel. It's one of those engines that proves a painful truth. There's budget-friendly, and then there's budget disaster. Tohatsu built its reputation on lightweight, dependable outboards, but the MD90 and MD115 proved that even good brands can have bad bolts. These mid-range two-strokes were tough little performers until the steering bracket decided to give up mid-run. Fleet operators began reporting cracks forming around the pivot bracket welds, especially in saltwater environments where corrosion worked its dark magic. Once that bracket went, you didn't just lose steering, you lost any say in where your boat was going next. Rental fleets in Florida and the Mediterranean quickly pulled these engines from service after a handful of close calls. Some even banned the models outright. Tohatsu responded with reinforcement kits and new alloy treatments, but by then, the damage to the name was done. It wasn't a fiery explosion or a catastrophic gear failure, just an old-fashioned metal fatigue problem that got ignored for too long. Ask any veteran mechanic, and they'll tell you the MD90 was a great motor, right up until it decided to steer itself. And for anyone behind the wheel, that's about as fun as a haunted autopilot. When Nissan teamed up with Tohatsu to build the TLDDI series, it looked like a match made in engineering heaven. Japanese reliability meets fuel-injected innovation. But the TLDDI 115 turned out to be the problem child. Its direct injection oiling system, while clever on paper, had a nasty habit of starving the engine of lubrication just when you needed it most. Owners began reporting sudden stalling at sea, or worse, complete powerhead seizures miles from shore. Patrol and rescue operators in Japan logged multiple incidents where boats lost power mid-operation, leading to the model being banned from official service fleets. The cause traced back to a defective oil pump drive and flaky injector calibration that left the cylinders running dangerously lean. Nissan and Tohatsu tried to patch it with recall kits and updated software, but the damage was done. Word spread that TLDI really stood for too little damn injection. It wasn't the most catastrophic engine ever made, but it earned its reputation by failing at the worst possible moment when the only thing between you and the horizon was 115 horses taking the day off. You've probably never seen one in person, and there's a reason for that. The Selva Killer Whale 200 was Italy's bold attempt to break into the high-horsepower market, and for a while, it turned heads with its aggressive name and slick white cowling. But behind that design flair was an electrical gremlin that turned steering into a nightmare. Owners started reporting sudden steering lockups at speed, often right after trimming up or turning sharply. The culprit? A defective wiring harness that could short out and freeze the electronic throttle and steering systems simultaneously. In Europe, it triggered an official recall campaign after a handful of accidents, forcing Selva to pull the entire production run from sale. Dealers quietly replaced the affected harnesses, but the reputation didn't recover. The phrase, "killer whale," went from marketing genius to cosmic irony because this motor really could try to kill you. After 2008, Selva dropped the model entirely and it faded into obscurity. Today, it's a rare find, remembered mostly as the Outboard that proved one painful lesson. Never give a dangerous motor a name that sounds like a threat. So this was it. From exploding fichts to haunted steering systems, these outboards prove that innovation without caution can sink even the biggest names. If you love wild marine stories like this, hit subscribe, drop a comment with your worst engine nightmare, and keep your prop in the water, not on fire.